So last week we were discussing about Docker file instructions. Still, we have few instructions to be covered, so we will discuss that. Let me terminate some unnecessary servers. So last week we discussed a few instructions, like almost everything. Now we have these instructions which we have to cover: args and labels. And there is one more thing called value. So we already covered these instructions which we already discussed. So these instructions we already discussed. So now, what is arg, right? So in Docker file, if you want to define like a variable, like it's kind of a variable, build arguments, right? So we can use arg. It's like a variable. It's like a variable. We can define variable. We can define arg in Docker file, which we can refer in any instruction in a Docker file. At runtime also, I mean to say runtime in the sense while creating image. While creating image, we can pass arguments. So it is like a variable which we can refer anywhere. And what is difference between env and arg? This is also you need to understand. What is difference between env and arg in Docker? Let me show you something like this. Labels and args, right, are very like not frequently used, but based on the requirement we will use. In my project, we are using this instruction also. We have a Docker file, something like this. There are a lot of instructions from JDK, something we are using. We are copying jar file into some directory, like something like this. We are using labels as well as arguments. So first, let me explain what is the use of label. We can attach key value pair to the image. It's like a tag. Using label, we can tag image with key value pair. It is like a tag. So in future, if you want to, if you inspect the image, you will get the more details. Like suppose I am creating an image. I want to know this image is created from which branch. So I'm creating an image, like my requirement is I'm creating an image. In future, I want to know that image was created from which branch. I'm creating some image. In future, I want to know like from which branch that image is created. We can, while creating an image itself, you can give a label. While creating an image itself, we can give a label. Whenever we inspect the image, I can see the labels. Like it is like a metadata for your image. Suppose I have these many images. If I inspect image, if I would have given a labels, I can see the labels also. If I inspect this image, if I would have given a labels, I can see labels also. So now, this is my image. While creating an image, you can give any key and value. You can attach any key and value as a label. As of now, I have not attached any label, right? So that's why it is showing as empty. Metadata, like in future, if you want to see like some kind of information, right, we can attach it as a label. In my project, current project, we are using labels. So we are creating images, right? We want to know like from which branch that image is created. So while creating an image itself, we are attaching labels. So in your CI/CD flow, will you be able to get the guys? Please be on mute. In CI/CD flow, like from Jenkins or Bamboo, whatever CI tool you are using, as part of your script pipeline, will you able to get the branch number? Right, you are already aware. Like, will you able to get the branch number? Jenkins, we already covered. Right, in pipeline, will you able to get the branch number? What is the current branch which you are trying to build? Branch name. Jenkins is completed, right, guys? Am I audible? Will you able to get the branch name? You have written a lot of pipeline scripts, right? So we are getting the branch name in the pipeline. That branch name we are trying to attach as a label to the image so that in the future In the future, we can inspect that image and we can identify from which branch that image is created. Right? So we are using that as a label. So let me show how to refer in the Docker file. So we have this Docker file, let's assume. This is the Docker file. So this is my Docker file. I can have something like this as a label. Label. We can give any key and value. We are giving label as branch, something like this. Branch name. So whenever I build an image, whenever I create an image, right? If I inspect this image, if I check in, if I pull this image anywhere, I can see that label. So if I push this image and if I deploy anywhere, like wherever I have this image, right, I can see that label from which branch it has been created. But if you hard code, that is the value it is taking. But there is another way we can pass that as an argument while creating an image. So we are having something like this, another instruction arg, some default branch name, develop. Here I can refer dollar branch name. It is like a variable you are defining. So whenever I don't pass argument at runtime, this is the value it will take. If I build again, now if I inspect also, I can see that as a branch name. But in a pipeline, what we are doing, like we have defined argument and label, something like that. In a pipeline, we can get your branch name, right? So we are passing something like this, hyphen hyphen build hyphen arg. Your argument name is basically branch name equals to something like this. Whatever you got, your environment your Jenkins variable branch name, right? In your pipeline, you can get branch name, right? So that one we are passing. Now let me pass something like this, just to feature branch name or like master. So hyphen hyphen build arg. We can pass this argument while creating an image like at runtime. Now what will be my label if I inspect this image? Like what will be the branch name? Whatever I pass here at runtime. So if I inspect, something like this. So we are using this one. It is not frequently used. Like we can using label, we can tag image with key value pairs. You can use n number of labels, not only one. You can have n number of labels. And arg, it's like a variable in a Docker file, which can refer in any instruction in a Docker file. At runtime also, we can pass argument, something like this, while creating an image. Environment variable also kind of a similar, but what is the difference? Environment variable we have used already, something like this. Key value. But what is the difference between environment variable and argument? Labels for metadata, like let me take this way. You are creating AWS instances, right? So you are creating AWS instances. You are tagging, right? Your AWS servers. Why we are tagging? Like you are creating AWS instances. You are tagging AWS instances also, right? While creating or after creating, like you can give tags, right? You can, like there is a option called tags. What is this? Like metadata. You can understand more, like you are trying to attach some metadata, data about data. So we are using labels. We are using labels to attach kind of a tags, more information about that image, like from which branch it is created, something like that. Argument is like a variable. You can refer in any instruction. Argument is like a variable which you can refer in any instruction in a Docker file. Environment also key value pair. But what is the difference, right? Whatever arguments I defined, it is available only while creating an image. But will I able to see those arguments once the image is created as a container? Those arguments will be available inside the container. Yes, this is very important. So in a container, arguments you cannot access. But when it comes to environment variable, can we see the environment variable? Can we refer the environment variable inside the container? Whatever environment variables we have defined? Yes. So arguments, if you want to pass some value at runtime while creating an image, you can use argument, but those arguments will not be available inside a container. Inside a container. Okay. So that is the difference. Like labels is like a metadata for your image. You can use, and if you want to pass some value while creating image at runtime, you can use arguments. And there is a one more instruction called value. Volumes are more important, guys. Suppose I created a container. Let's assume I created a container like Jenkins container or maybe database container. Suppose I created a Jenkins container or database container. Like each container will have its own file system. Yes or no? As we discussed, each container will have its own file system. Right? I created a database container, or maybe I created some Jenkins container. Jenkins also has a container, let's assume. If I create some jobs, where is that jobs information. Suppose if I created a database, if I insert some data into the database, and the database also running as a container, where will be the data? Where it will maintain the files? Inside the container, right? If I delete the container, will it be available? Whatever data we have already created. If you let me explain this way. So this is my Docker server. This is, let's assume this is my Ubuntu machine. On top of that, we have operating system. This is my server. This is my physical machine or virtual machine. On top of this, you have a Docker. Whenever you are creating containers, right? This is one container, let's assume, on top of Docker. Each container will have its own file system. Suppose, let me take this one as a database container. I am running MySQL database also as a container. Just to give an example. So inside this, your database process, MySQL process is running. This is so where will be your database files like tables information, records in like procedures information, right? Where is your records? It will be inside this container, like your DB files. Each container will have its own file system. So you are running database also as a container. Now this is where your DB files will be there. So my question here is, if I stop the container and if I start the container, data will be still there. This is created from MySQL image. This database is created from MySQL image. This container is created from MySQL image. If I stop the database container, if I start, still I have a data. Suppose if I delete this container, if I again recreate the container, do we have the file system? Whatever has been part of previous container, like whatever files. Guys, I think you should have to maximize your window. Okay. So when we are, like you might be seeing as a small window, you have to maximize your zoom screen. Okay. I already, maximized all my zoom, browser, okay, everything. So try to maximize your windows in your system. So my question here is, if I delete this container, all the data will be lost. If I delete this container, all the data will be lost, right? So in Docker, we have a concept of value. In Docker, we have a concept of value. If I delete the container, still I have to maintain this data. We have to use volumes concept. You have to use volumes concept. So there is a separate session. Day after tomorrow, we will discuss how to create a volumes and how to use the volumes with container. Volumes are more important. So we will discuss this in a separate session. like how to create volumes and how to use volumes with your container, so that even though your container is gone, still we will have our data. So then we will discuss volume. Using volume instruction, there is another way, like how to use volumes. We can define which folder we can mount container folder with some external file system. External file system. So we will discuss this volume in a separate session. It is very important in Docker. Docker volumes concept we will discuss. So these are the instructions we will use in a Docker file. But are we going to use all the instructions in a Docker file whenever you are Dockerizing your application? Are we going to use everything? Right? No, it's not like that. Based on the requirement. As per the requirement, my requirement, as I told, I should create an image, and that image also should have some kind of a labels. Like, as I told, my requirement was like, I want, in future, if I inspect that image, I should come to know from which branch I had created that image. So that we have achieved using labels and arguments. So we can attach like some kind of a tags. You can attach a labels to the image, some kind of a metadata. So based on, if you don't have that requirement, you may no need to use. So what is expose? We discussed the last class. I think I'm not sure whether you attended or not. So what is expose basically? It's like a documentation to provide information, like to provide which port has been used or exposed, right? As part of this image. So whenever someone is using this image, if they inspect, they'll come to know what is the container, like image port. It's like a documentation. It is not like you are opening some firewall or you are opening some port. And again, one question, guys. A lot of people got confused. I am using Tomcat image, something like this. And I copy my WAR file to some path. If I say, does it mean now this container will run on 9090? Suppose if I say something like this, does it mean the container port is changed? Like, does it mean your Tomcat inside the container, inside the the container, Tomcat process will run on 9090 or 8080? It will be on 8080 only, right? So if you say it doesn't mean your container port is changed, so it will be still running on 8080 unless until you explicitly change the port it will not change, right? But are you giving a correct information? If I say like expose 9090, does your application is like your Tomcat is running on 9090? If I say something like this, it is not correct unless until you explicitly update the port in your image. Explicitly you update the port. Suppose you have some, you no need to do that, guys. Container ports, you will not get a conflict. Have a Tomcat, this settings.xml, right? Tomcat server.xml. You have a server.xml inside the Tomcat, right? You copy your own server.xml. In this one, if you change your port to 9090, you copy your own server.xml. To the conf folder. Here, if you have updated as 9090, then it gives the correct meaning. So which doesn't mean you are changing your port, right? It is just like a documentation. But we no need to change the port numbers. You can go with the defaults in a container. So we will not get a port conflict. You can create n number of containers on a same port. So you no need to update the port numbers of your container. Basically your application port. So expose is just like a documentation. Most importantly, the questions comes here. What is difference between copy and add? What is run? What is CMD? What is entry point? Right? So again, there are two types of forms. There are two types of forms which we can define. Shell form and executable form. Run, CMD and entry point commands can be defined in two forms: shell form and executable form. Shell form. And executable form. We can define in these two forms. So what is shell form? Like something like this: run, mkdir, some, just to give an example. I'm taking something like this, or maybe you have CMD, java-jar, something like this, or entry point also something like this. So this is shell form. I can define run CMD entry point instructions in a shell form. This is your command. What command you want to execute, shell form. Same thing I can define in a executable form, something like this. Each one as an argument. So this we call it as an executable form. This we call it as an executable form. But what is the difference, right? Yes, because of this, we faced one issue recently. I'll explain what is the difference, but try to understand here. This is also same meaning. This is also same meaning. Right? It has also same meaning. It will execute like we are executing java-jar command. Here also we are executing java-jar command. This we call it as a shell form. This we call it as a executable form. But what is the difference here? How it will work internally? How it works internally? When I use this form, internally it will execute something like this. Bash, basically your shell. Okay, -c, this one. It will execute something like this internally. If you are using CMD while creating a container, it will execute something like this. It will execute something like this. Entry point also, if you use something like this, it will execute something like this. Shell, your shell, inside the shell, shell form. So now, if I use shell form, it will execute something like this. If I use, executable form, it will execute something like this. So what makes the difference here? Guys, if I use shell form, is your Java process is running as a parent process, or it will be running as a child process? If I use this one, what is your main process? If I use this one, what is the main process? If I use shell form, what is the main process? Your shell, basically your bash or sh. It can be bash or it can be sh. Shell, your shell. Now -c basically command. So now this is running as a child under bash parent. If I use this one, is your process is running as a main process or child process? Is your process is running as a main process or child process? But what makes the difference here, right? What makes the difference here? Whenever you are stopping the container, or containers are getting stopped, if I use shell form, the signal termination, the process termination goes to which one? Your actual process, or it will go to the your bash? If I execute Docker stop, or containers are getting killed, to which process the signal termination will go? Inside the container, the parent. But if the signal termination is going to parent, does child is aware that it is about to be killed? The child process, will it be aware? Like, the parent will not inform the child, right? The parent doesn't have a background that, child doesn't have a background that this is about to be killed. The parent will be killed. Obviously, child will be killed, but it will not react. It will not react what it has to be done whenever it is about to be killed. So this is your main process. Whenever you are stopping, signal termination will go to this. If this is stopped, obviously this is stopped, but it will not release the resources whatever has been acquired. Like in Java, if you are aware that like Java will acquire some database connections, like pool of database connections, right? Whenever your Java application is started, if your Java application is trying to connect, there is a connection pooling concept. So it will try to hold some database connection as a pool. So whenever it is your Java process is stopped, it will release those resources. But when we use this form, this process, the child process will not release whatever resources has acquired, because it is not informed that it is about to be killed. Because whenever we execute Docker stop or containers are killed interruptly, the child doesn't know. And we were facing this issue. Actually, when we started using Docker, we don't know like much about this. We defined something like this in my Docker file. In my Docker file, we defined something like this. Application is running Java. Whenever I create a container, Java, that application is running, but we see some kind of issues. It is not releasing the resources like database connections, even though container is killed or stopped. That is because internally it is executing something like this. In shell form, this is running as a child, not as a parent or not as a main process inside the container. But when we started converting that into executable form, so now if I use executable form, now which is the main process in this case? This is the main process. In this case, this is the main process, right? Now your application is running as a main process inside the container. Whenever we execute Docker stop or Docker kill, the signal termination goes to this process directly. This is running as a main process. So it will release whatever it has been acquired. The process will release the resources, whatever has been acquired. So which is recommended, especially for recommended for, right? Especially for CMD and entry point. This makes the difference. Run doesn't matter, but especially for CMD and entry point, if you are using CMD or if you are using entry point, right? Which is the recommended form to use? Are you going with shell form or executable form? What is recommended? Guys, this is one issue which we faced. In the interview, if they ask like, can you explain one issue which you faced, right? So you can explain this scenario. Like we were using we were using shell form. When we are using shell form, the process, the actual process which I want to run is running as a child under bash process. We were facing this issue, so we changed to executable form. So when we use executable form, this is the process which will be running as a main process. So which is recommended especially for CMD and entry point? Executable form, right? Executable form is the recommended way. Something like this. In our Docker file also, if you see some Docker file, whatever, wherever we have defined CMD or entry point, what form is this? This is executable form. Okay, so this is recommended, right? Wherever you see, like this is recommended. Any project you see, like for especially for CMD and entry point, executable form. So this is about the shell form and executable form which we are going to use in a Docker file. Now, let me show some sample Docker files, guys. just to make you understand the Docker file instructions, I kept some Docker files. I kept some Docker files in a subdirectory. Now, we already discussed. If I have a CMD and entry point together, CMD will be passed as an argument for your entry point. So this is not going to be executed as a command. This echo will be passed as an argument for your ls. This also will be passed as an argument for your ls. We already discussed, like if you have a CMD and entry point together, this will be passed as an argument for your entry point. So just to make you understand, I have kept some sample Docker files here. In this Docker file, what I am trying to do, guys? By looking at this Docker file, can you tell me what I am trying to do? So if I create an image, out of this Docker file, what I will have as part of this image? If I create an image out of this Docker file, what will be there as part of my image? I am creating my own base image. Like suppose you are trying to Dockerize some application. And you don't see a image, whatever base image you are trying to use, that is not part of your Docker hub. Can we create our own? Base images? This is like a kind of a base image. This is kind of a base image which we are trying to create. I am taking CentOS as a base. When this run will be executed? While creating a image itself. Now what I am trying to do here, just to demonstrate add, I commented run. So what add will do? Will it able to download this file from the remote location? It will download. What is dot here basically? Dot is basically like the current directory inside the image. So current directory. So what is my current directory? Here inside the image, what is the current directory? This one. The opt/tomcat. We downloaded a tar file. Sir, you told if it is a tar file, it will extract. But why again you are explicitly running that command? If you understand, it will extract the tar file if it is only ending with star dot tar. But here it is tar dot gz. So that's why it is not going to extract. I am extracting myself. So when these all run instructions will be executed, guys? All these run instructions will be executed while creating a image, right? So why I am saying expose 8080? Because I am going to run Tomcat inside this image, so they can come to know like what port that is running. So what is the CMD? Whenever I create a container out of this image, what instruction or what command will be executed? Something like this. So I am creating my own base image, something like this. I am creating my own base image. So this is my Docker file, Docker build -t, something like this, my own Tomcat image. The file name is different. So I'm downloading, I'm using CentOS as a base, very lightweight container OS, right? Now I'm trying to create a Docker image using this Docker file. Now, is my image is created successfully, guys? My image is not created successfully. Like, what is the issue? Where it has failed? Which step it has failed? This step. What might be the issue? Maybe whatever URL I used, right? This URL is not working. This URL is not working, if you see. So let me update my URL. So let me update in my Docker file. Sorry. So this one. Guys, do I need to update any other line? Do you see still I need to update any other lines? Or if you see this one, here I am downloading 5.5.9, but here it was old. So let me change. So now let me build. Now we are trying to kind of a creating. So Shravani is asking, can you explain that exact issue when you faced when you are using shell farm? So I told what the issue I'm facing, guys. Can someone answer? When I was using shell farm, I explained we were facing some issue. Can someone answer like what is the issue I was facing? Like the process will take some resources. Like if you're using Java, right? Java will have like kind of a connections. It will establish connections with your database, right? Like pool of database connections, right? It will not release the resources. Process will take some resources that will, it will not release, it is not releasing the resources like a pool of connections. I like, your, it is not getting released. So that is because the Java process doesn't aware that it is about to be killed, because we are using shell form. So when we converted that shell form into executable form, the Java process is running as a main process. The Java process is running as a main process. So it is, whenever we execute Docker stop or Docker kill, our container is killing itself because of some issues, it will release, because the signal termination goes to the main process. So I have a database. I have like, database can have like, it can create up to like 100 connections. Suppose your container is stopped and it is not releasing 10 connections. It has acquired some connections with the database. If it is not going to release those 10 connections, even though the container is killed, even though process is killed, can you use those connections for another application or another container? Resources, right? It has acquired some resources and it is not releasing the resources. Can you again use those resources if it is not released? So that is the problem. Resources are holded, so we cannot use. That is the problem it is creating. This is normal Linux concepts, right? It is not something like, something that I am trying to discuss here in the Docker, right? So whenever you have a in normal Linux machine or Windows machine, if you create something, if you run some application, it will create a process. Process will acquire some resources. So now let's wait. Still it is executing this one. It is taking some time. Let's wait for some time. My system is very slow because we are using just 1 GB RAM servers, right? So let's wait for some time. So let me stop this process. Let me delete all the images because our server has very less storage, less memory. So let me reuse that. Just let me delete whatever is not in use. If you see, our system itself is having very less memory and less storage, right? Now that is not responding at all because I have lot of images and I created lot of images. It might be already occupied lot of storage. It doesn't have a storage, right? If you see, it is not at all responding now, the server. Let me quickly do one thing. Let me stop the server and I will increase the resources for this server. Let me stop this. I will change from t2.micro to t2.medium. Because I already have lot of images, right? It might be running out of storage also, like hard disk. Now, if it is running out of storage, what can I do? How can I increase? Guys, we discussed in AWS. Now it is running out of storage. Let's assume. What can I do? We discussed. So each server will be using one EBS as a value, right? Can we change the? Can we increase the storage? We can increase the storage. So this is using this storage, this EBS. It is just having 8 GB. Maybe let me increase the storage. Guys, but do I need to stop the server if I want to change the volume size? Do I need to stop the server if I want to increase EBS value? To increase the volume size, you no need to stop the server. But if I want to change the instance type, will I able to change without stopping the server? So to change the instance type, you need to stop. So that's why I stopped. Let me change from t2.micro. It is not completely stopped. Yes, you delete basically whenever you are practicing, right? You delete all the images, whatever you have been created, so that you will get some space. So let me change instance settings, change instance type. I will change to t2.medium. Now let me start. What is the best practice? Change the instance type or change the EBS value? Instance type is different, EBS is different. Suppose if you are running out of storage, what you have to change? If you are running out of storage, what you have to change? If you change instance type, does it going to increase your storage capacity? It will just increase your memory and CPU, computing power and memory, RAM, not the storage. So if you are running out of storage, you have to change, you have to increase EBS size. If you are running out of memory or CPU, you have to change the instance type. So let's wait still it is yet to come. Let me see if I can connect now. It is still coming up. So if I see, there are a lot of images which I created. It so let me clean up. Now I increase the volume size. I increase the volume size. So hopefully now I'm good. Or let me clean up. CD Docker build -t Docker hands-on / Tomcat. I'm trying to create my own Docker base image. -f. I think Sharavanan, you have not attended AWS, right? If you just increase the volume size, so you no need to restart to reflect that automatically. It will reflect that. It will increase the size, EBS size. You no need to restart the server. AWS, right? You don't need to restart the server. Automatically, it will reflect there. So now my image creation is successful. Now this image, what is there in this image? Do we have our application or only the software? What is there in this image which I created? Only the software. Now can I use this as a base image? In our Docker file, I can use something like this. So we can copy the var file, like I have Tomcat inside this one. Whatever application. If I push this image to the repository, private or public, private repository, I can use something like this. So we can create our own base images using the Docker file. If you want to customize your softwares, you can create your own base images, right, by writing a Docker file. Now there is another Docker file, which let me show that as well. This is also one Docker file. This is the Docker file which we executed just now. This is also kind of doing the same thing, but what base image I am using here? Here in this above one, Ubuntu. Ubuntu as a base. I am trying to update. So when these run instructions will be executed? While creating a image, while creating a image itself. So there are some best practices which you have to follow. Now, what are the best practices which I have to follow? Right? Now I am not following the best practices when I am using this one. If you see in this Docker file, I am not following the best practices. What are the best practices? Reduce the number of layers wherever it's possible. We have to reduce the layers, number of layers for our image wherever it's possible. The more number of layers you have, right, the performance will be impacted. Now, how can I reduce the number of layers? As I told, each run, CMD, copy, add entry point will create a layer. So how can I reduce the number of layers? If you see here, what I am doing is, am I executing this one as a separate run, this one as a separate run, or I am trying to merge the instructions wherever it is possible? Wherever it is possible, I am trying to combine the commands. Instead of having something like this, I would have done like this. So now, how many layers it will create? If I have something like this, if you see this one, both will be processed in a same layer. But if I would have done something like this, how many layers? If I have something like this is one layer, this is another layer. So wherever it is possible, try to reduce the layers, number of layers. It doesn't mean combine all the run instructions into a single run. Wherever it is related, this is one layer. Right? So now, this is one thing. Don't copy or install unnecessary packages or softwares. Don't copy or install unnecessary softwares or packages which is not at all required for your application to run. What is the problem? What is the problem? It is not a machine, right? It is not a machine. Suppose if I install some software, will it take some memory? Will it take some storage? Right? When I create a container, if I install some additional software like very small software also, is it going to take some memory? Is it going to take some storage? If it is not at all required, why should I install that software? And if I install unnecessary softwares or if I copy unnecessary files, what about the image size? Does your image size will increase or not? If there is more size on the image, build and deployment time also will increase, and it will take us, CPU and memory whenever you create a container, right? So we should not have unnecessary softwares or files as part of that image, which is not at all required to run your application. If I have some container here, I don't have a container. Let me see. Now let me run this container. Let me start this container back. So if I go inside this, do I have a VI software or Vim software inside the container? Like, will not have all the unnecessary softwares. Curl is there. wget is also there. Like, netstat is not there, right? So do we have all the softwares? Like, do we have a Vim or VI, right? You know, do we need these softwares to run our application inside the container? So what is minimum? What is required for minimum? What is required for your application to run only those softwares? So I have a Java, I have a Tomcat, some minimal softwares. So whenever we are creating an images, don't copy or install unnecessary packages or softwares which is not at all required to run your application. And one more thing, use only official images as a base image. So we have to use only official images as a base image. So if you see, right, there are a lot of images in Docker Hub. There are a lot of images in Docker Hub. Like if I see Tomcat, I have a lot of Tomcats. I have a lot of Tomcats, right? This is also Tomcat image. This is also Tomcat image. But are these are official images, guys? Are these are official images? These are not official images, right? I can create my own Tomcat image. I can push to the Docker Hub or whatever it is. But we should not use non-official images. These are the official images, which is provided by the official Apache software. So try to use official images. Don't use unofficial images as a base image. And one more thing, try to use Alpine images wherever it's possible. Try to use Alpine image wherever it's possible. What is Alpine image? There are some Alpine image. What is Alpine? So it's a very lightweight container OS. It's very lightweight Linux. It's very lightweight Linux. Wherever it is possible, try to use Alpine image. If you see this now, Alpine Linux is a Linux distribution, right? the image is only 5 MB. Within just 5 MB size, I will get base, Linux base. You have a Alpine Java also, like Alpine Git, like wherever it is possible, use Alpine images. If you see, we have like Alpine Git, Alpine Helm, like there are a lot of Alpine images as a software. So wherever it is applicable, try to use Alpine images. These are the best practices which we have to follow. Now, if you see still here, I need some improvement. Still, I need some improvement. What are the improvements? Here, still, I have some improvements. I have to do some corrections. What are the corrections I need to do here? CMD, right? In which form I am using? Shell, right? It should be executable form. And also here, if you observe, I am downloading a tar file. I extracted a tar file, but did I remove the tar file? Do I need a tar file again inside that image? I downloaded the file, right? So not required, right? So I should have cleaned up. I should have removed that tar file. So these are the best practices which you have to follow while creating a Docker images. So now, guys, suppose you missed some software. Suppose you created a Docker image and you created a container, right? Can we like, something like I have Docker image I created, and as part of image creation, I have not configured something. I have missed some software or I have missed some file. Is it recommended to directly install in a container? Suppose you miss some file or you miss some software while creating an image. Is it recommended to directly install in a container? I can go and update my container. So whatever updates you have done in a container, will it be available? Will it be available if your container is deleted and again you create a container from the image? Whatever changes you have directly done in a container, it will not be available. So whatever is required in your container, from where it should come? Whatever is required in your container, from where it should come? It should come from the image itself. So while creating an image itself, you have to do everything. Okay. So now someone is asking like, can we have a multiple from instructions? Can we have a multiple from instructions from something like this if required from something like this? Can we have something like this, right? So will I have a Git software when I create a final image if I have something like this, right? It is not like that, right? So there is a concept of multi-stage. There is a concept of multi-stage. Let me show that. You can just copy some file from one stage to another stage. You can have a multiple from, but there is a concept of multi-stage. If I just define something like this, it is not a multi-stage. So here I can perform something. Here I can perform something. Everything I can automate using Docker file itself. I can perform something. This we call it as one stage. I am tagging this one as one stage. So when it comes to the next stage, suppose this is my last stage, right? Here we will not tag. We are tagging this one. Like I can give something like this also. This is one stage. This is another stage. I can copy some file or folder from this stage to this stage. But it is not going to copy entire things, whatever is part of this stage. It is not going to copy the Git software. It is not going to copy everything. Here I can copy some outcome of this stage. Some outcome of this stage I can copy to this stage, multi-stage Docker file. So there is a lot of complex thing in your Docker image creation. So how can I reduce the complexity and how can I reduce the image size? There are a lot of complex steps you have to perform. So my requirement is something like this. In the Docker file itself, using Docker file itself, clone your project. Just to give an example, and build your project. As part of Docker file itself, your requirement is clone your project, build your project, and create an image with your application package. Suppose you have this kind of a requirement. If I write as something like this from Tomcat, I can do something like this. Run. If it is CentOS base, I can say yum install git. I can say run git clone. I can clone my project. If required, I can install Maven also if it is Java based project. Then I can execute. I can go inside the directory. Whatever project I have cloned directly, I can do something like this. Not like just work there. I can do something like this. Then I can do something like this. mvn clean install. Then run cp. Everything is inside your Docker. Normal cp /user /tomcat /web apps. So something like this. Suppose you have a requirement, like very complex requirement. If I do it something like this also, it will work. But what is the problem? What about the output of the image? This image, what and all softwares it will additionally have if I do something like this? The final image, what and all things will be part of our final image, guys? Will I get a Git software? Will I get a Maven software? And I will also have that .m2 repository, local repository. But do I need all these softwares in my final image to run my application? Do I need Git? Do I need a Maven? Do I need all the complete local repository? What about the image size? It will be very huge, right? Suppose if you have a very complex requirements, we can achieve using multi-stage. What is multi-stage? Like I can have a from Git, I can clone this one. This I can tag as one stage as build, something like this. Next, I can take Maven image. So here, what can I do? Copy from here. I can mention something like this. From this is stage, from this build stage, I can copy one for whatever project I have cloned, something like this. To some current directory. Now here, in this stage, I no need to install Maven also. I can go inside this, I can run this one. This one I can tag it as a, like maybe clone. This one I can tag it as a build. Now, here I can say from Tomcat something. Here I can copy from this stage. I can copy only that var file. Now, this is the final image. This is the final image. In same Docker file, I can have a multiple froms, but multi-stage. If I follow this approach, what will be there in my final image, guys? Will I get a Git software in my final image? Will I get a Maven and its local repository in my final image, or only the application? If I use this multi-stage concept, only the application. Very rare you use multi-stage. Very rare you use multi-stage, but using multi-stage, you can create a Docker images with whatever is required. Maybe you will get a question now, sir, do I need to build and deploy? Do I need to clone? Do I need to build in the Docker file itself? Not required, guys. So whatever CI/CD job we are going to use in Jenkins server, you install Java. In Jenkins server, you install Maven. In Jenkins server, you have a Docker. You are not going to clone, you are not going to build in the Docker itself, right? Docker file itself. So you are going to build, you are going to copy as part of your Jenkins process. Just to give an example, I am showing this multi-stage Docker file, something like this. So multi-stage, something like this, multiple stages. This is multi-stage. If you have a complex requirement, you can reduce the image size by creating a multi-stage Docker file. So this is one stage. This is another stage. This is your final outcome. So if you see from previous stage, this is one stage, right? From previous stage, I am just copying whatever file is required or folder. In this stage also, we are copying whatever is required. So the final image will not have all these softwares. You can have a multiple froms, but that is basically multi-stage Docker file. So this is how you see multi-stage Docker file. This is one stage. This is another stage. The final image which I am going to create will have only whatever I am trying to copy from the previous stage. So this is about Docker files, guys. We almost discussed 3 days about Docker files. Very important concept. That's why we spent almost 3 days. In the interview, 10 to 15 minutes, they may ask questions on the Docker file itself, like what is from, what is run, what is CMD, what is entry point. Can we have more than one CMD? Can we have more than one entry point? If I have more than one CMD or entry point, which one will be executed? If I have CMD and entry point together, how it will work? So this is about Docker file, very important concept. When it comes to our application Docker file, you may have just 10-15 lines, not more than that, but you should aware what are the instructions can be used to create a Docker image for your application. If you have any questions on the Docker file instructions, let me know, guys. If you don't have any questions, we'll continue tomorrow with the Docker networks. What is Docker networks? Before that, we will try to discuss about monolithic and microservice. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll continue tomorrow. And before I start the session, I want to check the progress on the assignments. So I have given some assignments. Push and pull image from ECR. This is one assignment which I have given. Other one is create a CI/CD pipeline to build and deploy application as a container. How many of you able to do this? I see hardly like 4 people or 3 people responded. So maybe you can uh, ping your pipeline, or maybe do one thing. Just share the screenshot of your pipeline, maybe in the WhatsApp personally to me. If you are in WhatsApp group, or if you are in Skype, you can post personally to me from the Skype, wherever you are. Okay. Pipeline output, maybe you can share your Jenkins, basically Jenkins URL, username and password. I'll just cross check. Pipeline script also sufficient, so I can just make it out whether it is working or not. The pipeline script is also sufficient. Guys, I see hardly like 4 or 5 people has completed this assignment. What about others? Unless until you practically do this, you cannot understand. In real time, this is what we are going to do, nothing more, right? You have some projects. You should know how to build and apply that projects. If I'm using Docker, you should know how to build and deploy that application, that project as a Docker containers or Docker images. So we are trying a lot of time here. We are spending a lot of time here to discuss about what is Docker, what is Docker file, what is Docker image, what is Docker registry, what is container. Same concepts we are going to apply in our projects. If you complete the assignment, then only you can understand all these concepts, how to build, how to deploy. I am here to help you guys. I am here to help you. If you don't put the effort from your side, you cannot learn anything, right? Even I explain 1 year also, the Dockers and Kubernetes, if you just join for the sake of joining, you cannot learn any concept. Try to spend some time, try to put the effort. I am here to help you. I am providing the documents, I am providing the videos, I am providing the links. If you stuck anywhere, I am here to help you. But you need you need to put some effort. So try to complete this assignment at least by tomorrow also, and try to let me know whoever is already completed. Okay. We'll continue tomorrow on this one, right? On the Docker networks and what is monolithic and what is microservice. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, guys. Thank you. I'm stopping the session for today. We'll continue tomorrow.